when you look for founders, inventors, and disruptors, dyslexics are massively overrepresented. Why dyslexics fail in the corporate world but thrive when they're building their own companies? That's what we are unpacking today. Every time I ask an entrepreneur the reason why they decided to start a company, there's one word that come up over and over again, which is, I started a new company because I was unhirable. When I was around 6 years old and my brother around 10, we would spend entire weekends programming, but on the other hand, my grades were, I would say, below average. On one hand, I would spend entire weekends programming in the computer, and on the other hand, my grades at school were very poor. So as you can imagine, my parents and teachers, they always say, it's not a problem of intelligence. It's either he is lazy or he just doesn't want to do the school stuff. But in reality, it wasn't that I was not trying or I was lazy. I was trying, but I just wasn't good at it. Things felt a little off for me. Like I wasn't able to do things that everybody else would do very easily. When I was talking with friends, I would make comments that were taken like completely off topic. And, people was looking at me with weird faces like, what is this guy talking about? Many, many years later, my son, Ben, was diagnosed with dyslexia. And so was I. And that was a turning point for me because I realized that it wasn't stupid as I thought most of my life, but it was just different. I had something. And that something was dyslexia. But here are the great news. In the right environment, what feels like a handicap in a non-dyslexic world can become a superpower. When I was diagnosed with dyslexia, I already had my company that I couldn't be fired so easily. So I decided to make my dyslexia public. Just a few days later, a coworker came to me and she told me that she was dyslexic too. And that hearing me talk about that openly was a huge relief for her. That moment encouraged me to keep talking about it openly. So coming back to the word unhirable, when my brother finished college, he got a job almost immediately. But when I finished college, it was almost impossible for me to get a job. It seemed to me that every person interviewing me was seeing in me a big word that said unhirable. So I tried harder and harder, but still nothing. It's like someone said, if you judge a fish by its capacity of climbing a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Trying harder won't make any good, besides generating more frustration. In the meantime, I developed other skills like resilience, the appetite to become better and better every time, and most importantly, how to make money so I can hire myself, since anybody else seems to be interested in doing that. So for me, becoming an entrepreneur wasn't really a choice. It was the only option. And that's the reason why every time an entrepreneur tells me I was unhirable, I know exactly what they're talking about. Welcome to Born to Unicorn. As you can see, I'm not interviewing anyone. We are deep diving into a very specific topic, which is how turn dyslexia into the entrepreneur's superpower. In the corporate world, a dyslexic person struggles. We are told that we cannot spell well. We are slow readers. We miss a lot of details. But most importantly, is that for most people, it's hard to understand our ideas or proposals and support them. So most of the time, a dyslexic person in a corporate world is going to be underestimated, rejected for job, and probably overlooked for promotions too. Here's the twist. When you look for founders, inventors, and disruptors, dyslexics are massively overrepresented. A study by Julie Logan at Cass Business School found that 35% entrepreneurs in the US know that they are dyslexic, which of course the real number is probably higher because not all people know that they are dyslexic, compared to only 10% of the general population. Why dyslexics fail in the corporate world but thrive when they're building their own companies? That's what we are unpacking today. The corporate world is aligned with the schools. Schools prepare you for the corporate world. School teach sequential, linear, text-heavy processing. One of the most fascinating traits of the dyslexic mind is what Hyde and Hyde call the epiphanic thinking, which is when the answer to a problem, for instance, comes to your mind as a full picture and not as a step-by-step process. For most people, problem solving looks like A, B, C, and D. For a dyslexic entrepreneur, it's more like A to E. The steps between A and E are not obvious, but the conclusion is crystal clear. And the history is full of these examples of people that goes from A to E, no steps in the middle or no obvious idea of how those steps are aligned, but with a clear conclusion. And let me give you some examples that I want to read for you. So the first example is Richard Branson, founder of Virgin Group. Branson famously struggled in school, couldn't read well, dropped out at school at 16. But his dyslexic brain connected dots others didn't. He saw the music's label weren't serving young people well. So he launched Virgin Record out of a church basement. Our second example is Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA. Kamprad struggled with reading, had his breakthrough when he realized that furniture could be shipped flat packed instead of assembled. That wasn't the result of linear analysis. It was a sudden visual spatial realization. If a table's legs are removed, it's cheaper to transport. That one flash of insight turned IKEA into the world's largest retailer. Our third example is Barbara Corcoran from Corcoran Group and also a Shark Tank member. She was diagnosed with dyslexia and often says that her strength was jumping ahead of competitors. Her breakthrough epiphany, she couldn't compete on scale with other real estate firms in New York, so she flipped the narrative and published the Corcoran Report, the first real estate report in New York City. This wasn't incremental thinking. It was a narrative leap. If I control the story, I control the market. The fourth example I want to share with you is Steve Jobs. Even when he was never diagnosed, many biographers believed that he was, in fact, dyslexic. Jobs was notorious for seeing the finished product even before the engineers were able to understand how to build it. The iPod wasn't invented step by step. He imagined thousands of songs in your pocket and then demanded engineer to figure out how to make it real. Epiphanic thinking looks impulsive to outsiders, like if you're skipping a step or being unrealistic. But history shows that most successful entrepreneurs didn't walk the logical staircase. They took the elevator straight to the top floor. And just then, did anyone else figure out how they got there? And for dyslexic, that's not a flaw. So what are the strengths of dyslexic entrepreneur? First is delegation, necessary because detailed work is exhausting. Second is oral communication, storytelling, pitching investors, and motivating teams. The third is resilience after years of overcoming academic underestimation. The fourth is creativity. Thinking outside of the box is a normal standard for a dyslexic person. Alexander Passé came up with the idea of the self-demonstrator syndrome. So every failure at school becomes fuel for fire. Every dismissal becomes proof to prove wrong. So why dyslexics fail in the corporate world? Because they reward compliance, consistency, and attention to detail. While dyslexics thrive on autonomy, vision, and control over workflow. So in a corporate world, if you skip steps to do a report, that is rejected. But in startups, if you skip steps, you end up building an Uber before nobody else saw the opportunity. In the right context, an entrepreneur becomes not unhirable, but unstoppable. My recommendation is that first, learn how to delegate work. You won't be good at the details. So you have the overall vision, leave the detailed work to other people. Use a lot of tech. For me, all the conversational models and AI was the salvation. Before that, I was writing an email. I had to read it 100 times to know if it was a typo, a mistake, or even I was changing the meaning of what the email was supposed to say. But now I use a lot of AI to help me on my handicap. So basically, AI is not competing with me, it's actually my co-pilot today. And finally, your main topic should be vision, ideation, and systems. Those things are your superpowers. So a dyslexic person should not lower the objectives as many people believe, so they are not disappointed with the results. They actually need to be in the right environment where they can thrive. So unhirable doesn't mean that you're not good at working. It means that the corporate world is not the best environment for you, but the entrepreneurial world, it's built for you. So if you are dyslexic or if you know someone who is dyslexic, know that dyslexia is not a weakness. It's a different architecture, one that builds companies, industries, and even revolutions. So thanks for joining me in this new episode of Born to Unicorn. If you like the content, like and leave your comments. If there is any other topic that you would like to develop in this podcast, just let me know on the comments as well. Until the next one.